Hello, and welcome to this episode of Redefining the Customer Journey, where we take a deep dive into how anyone from a local small business owner up to a corporate CEO can build a modern business that is flexible and able to quickly adapt and evolve. Specifically, in this episode, we're going to give you some major takeaways on the topic of naming conventions. With these easy to implement business principles, you're going to make more money while saving hundreds of hours by implementing a few simple steps. We've all seen businesses collapse because they were built on weak foundations, riddled with problems in their day to day, which are also unnecessarily complex to grow and scale. We want to help you build something that leverages your time and resources for maximum effectiveness without sacrificing your customer experience. I'm Paul Sokol, founder of BPro, best-selling author of the Infusionsoft cookbook, which contains over 80 CRM-based business recipes for automated follow-up. And I've been helping small to medium-sized businesses under 50 million grow with automation since 2008.
And I'm Bobby Persaud, founder of LeadPass.com, which helps you set your business processes on autopilot to free up more time and save money through automated processes. And I've been in the automation world since 2016, primarily in the financial space. And in each episode, we're going to go over and cover one specific CRM topic to explain what it is, why it's important, common problems, and the best solution we've seen throughout our experience and how to help you more. So as we mentioned for today's episode, we are going to be talking about naming conventions.
Woo, naming conventions. So what are naming conventions? I'm going to get real nerdy here, and I'm going to say my opinion is that naming conventions are the intentional nomenclature for various CRM pieces. Being intentional about it, everything.
So simply put, it's outlining each piece of the system and making sure that one piece is easily able to be understood by the name, and then if you have another part that goes in conjunction with it, that the naming convention is steady throughout the entire process of the CRM and the sales journey.
Yes. So that's kind of what it is, but let's talk about why this is really important. So I would say that, because last episode was talking about planning, so having good naming conventions just straight up makes planning easier. Absolutely. That's a huge takeaway is like when your naming conventions are dialed in, you can plan stuff very easily.
It always helps, if you have a bunch of different items that go together in a grouping, their naming convention should always kind of be in the same pool. So folders are a great example. So if you have a folder of a product line, all the products should be in that folder. If you have different types of pipeline stages, they should all be in the groups of that naming convention. And it's just simple, steady grouping and naming conventions so that if anyone comes into your system, they should be able to understand it super quick.
Yes, that's a huge one. That's another reason why naming conventions are very important, because it's going to help you onboard new team members and also vendors much faster and more consistently. That's a big deal.
Yeah, so especially when you want to think about like scalability and growth of your staff, if it's something that's really simple and easy to understand and someone can just go into the system and realistically know what it means without having to have an explanation, it curbs your entire onboarding process.
Yeah. And by focusing on your naming conventions, that forces you to stop and think about that scalability and growth, which part of that too is also troubleshooting as well. So when your names are really dialed in and really clear, that makes troubleshooting easier because there's always going to be things to troubleshoot. I've never ever worked with any kind of a CRM or a system that every once in a while you don't have to try and figure out what's going on. So that's a really big reason why I would say that's another big reason why naming conventions are very important here. So let's dig into our expertise here, Bobby, because the first two episodes were kind of laying the groundwork, and now this is the first episode we can start to get real gnarly and real in the weeds with CRM stuff. So what are some of the common issues that you've seen just around naming conventions, just the way people name stuff?
Okay, so if you want to talk about common issues when it comes to naming conventions, it's someone starts off and they say, okay, listen, I want to do this in my CRM and I want to sell this product. But along the way, nothing is the same. So if you take something, it should probably follow into the same conventional wisdom as your opportunity stages and as your pipeline stages and your custom fields and the custom values and the workflows. So if you have someone who wants to get appointment booked for first consultation. Their tag should probably be, appointment booked, first consultation. And in their custom field, it should be time slot, first consultation. And the whole way through that customer journey, so when you look at something, it's super clear that this is because of that. And you don't have to worry about everything in between. So
Yes.
I think that the first thing is just super clear, very easy language so that no one is confused.
Yes. Yeah. When you're, for example, when you're confusing the names or you're coding stuff in there, like using abbreviations, that doesn't make it, that's hard for people. Don't be using like codes and acronyms and things like that. Um, that's a real common issue with any kind of naming convention, because that just now that silos the knowledge. That's an extra layer of training and onboarding that people need just to understand. Here's like the core acronyms kind of thing. Like um, that just makes it harder. Another really common issue I see with naming conventions, and this is kind of like a high level mindset thing, is that people ignore it because it's not customer facing. They think that, oh well, this is internal only, the customer's never going to see it, so who cares that we're not really putting a lot of thought and love into it. Well, that's a huge issue, because then you'll end up with things like database field names aren't obvious or easy for the end user to understand. So like a good example was recently I was working with a client where they're giving out bucks, like Bob bucks, right? And people can do things to earn Bob bucks, and they can redeem those Bob bucks for books and courses and things like that. So we needed to create a new field in the database to track how many of these Bob bucks they had available. And the person I was working with just wanted to say, just go ahead and call it Bob bucks. And I'm like, okay, well, that's still kind of ambiguous. Like, what kind of Bob is this? Like the Bob bucks they've spent? Is this the Bob bucks that are available? Is it a credit that they're getting? Like, who knows? So by thinking about again the growth and scalability and the troubleshooting of it, we came up with available Bob bucks was the name of the field, because now it's plain English. The end user can look at that and be like, oh, available Bob bucks. Person's got 100 of them, right? Whereas if it just said Bob bucks, they have to understand and be trained what that means. Which, and we'll talk about this when we get to the custom fields episode. Actually, that's the next episode we're going to talk about specifically. But when you're doing the naming conventions, another common issue with that is that the field types aren't even proper. So, like for Bob Bucks, for example, I absolutely made sure that was a number field, so we can look, in the CRM, it understands what a number is. We can say show me greater than, less than. But if you're not paying attention to it, you can create that as just like a text field. And now, good luck doing any kind of searches or any kind of ranges here or any kind of math function. Like that's a big common issue with naming stuff, is just really ignoring it because it's not customer facing. And I feel like
One
I
of the
just went
other
on a
issues,
rant.
well, one of the other issues that you talked about right there that you brushed up on is if you have a salesperson or an admin staff and they're going in and they don't know exactly what the Bob bucks, is that what it was
Yeah,
there, Paul?
I'm just using Bob, Bob Bucks.
And they go to input some data into that field, but they're not really sure if it was received or if it's owing or if it's something else, because the naming conventions are proper. They end up putting in wrong data. So when you pull reports at the end of the month to be like, okay, here are the KPIs for this account. Here's how much we've sold. Here's how much we have coming in. It just screws up their whole data sets. So you end up at the fundamental core really screwing up the long-term data.
Yeah, yeah, that's a huge issue here, and especially when things are not clear and distinct, but they're similarly named. Um, yeah, that just makes it harder to troubleshoot. So like talking about like appointments. If there's like, let's say we use tags for the various appointments, like appointment, scheduled, and appointment completed, and appointment, canceled, or something like that, because those are very closely related, similar kinds of objects. If your names aren't clear and distinct about what each of those mean, again, it can throw your reporting off. People can be manually inputting data incorrectly, and that all stems back to the root cause of not focusing on your naming conventions, which is a huge issue. So, um, I guess talking about some of the best solutions here, which I think we've started talking about them a little bit. Um, but I think a big takeaway is just keeping consistent with whatever the naming structures you use. Yes, it is internal, and maybe it's not going to be the absolute best thing, but like, be consistent. You can always go back and rename stuff later if you really need to.
Yeah, and designed for like ease of use, right? So that first customer who comes in, or that your admin staff or your sales staff that comes in, they should know what it is without having to pull up a chart, a table of content, and see exactly what it is. It should just be very clearly laid out. This is what it is. Okay, so that there's no issues when they're manually inputting the data or when they're trying to configure it for something new coming in.
Yeah.
And it always happens. You'll look at a report at the end of the week and be like, "Wow, what the hell happened here?" And then you're kind of going through it and troubleshooting it, and you're like, oh, "Okay, so Tom made a mistake here, here, and here, and this is why." And it was just because of a very easy clerical error that could have been avoided.
Yeah, I think that that's probably one of the best solutions with your naming conventions is keep in mind that because it is internal, you want to design it to make it easier for you and your team, those end users in whatever their day to day is. And specifically, I think we've talked about this before, but I want to again call out these really big takeaways is that make sure that the way things are named explain themselves in plain English. Yeah, again, and I think was it the first episode? No, last episode talking about the planning, Bobby. You were saying make sure that people in grade school should be able to understand it. That's the kind of plain English that you want to use, and also again avoiding abbreviations. Like unless you really for some specific reason need to abbreviate something, like try and write it out or find a more eloquent way to do it, just to make it easier for people.
Yeah, and depending on what type of industry you're in, there's going to be very specific industry knowledge and terminology that goes along with that, whether that's in like mortgages, insurance, real estate. But for the most part, you just want to break it down to the simplest possible form so that anyone who maybe not even from that industry, especially if you're hiring VAs from the Philippines who might not be used to that type of terminology, can just easily access it and know what's going on. Because worst case scenario is like you get a couple of VAs on because they're amazing, and then they start putting in a whole bunch of data that just doesn't correlate properly with what the naming convention should have been.
Yeah, that's another reason to avoid abbreviations too, just in general for that being internationally friendly. Even if you're like a small local business like a restaurant, cool. We talk about planning for scalability and growth. Maybe at some point you will need to expand into a franchise, or maybe you will become international. Like, why not behave like that now? You might as well. It's only going to benefit you in the future. Um, and talking about benefits here, there's some natural naming convention tricks that are pretty handy that I use regularly, which is very simple, but most people forget about it. Leverage the alphabetical nature of sorting. Like if there's like if you can sort folders alphabetically or tags or just some kind of thing, keep in mind that you can leverage alphabetical alphabeticality. I don't know if that's a word. Just for the sorting. So like something that I'll see a lot. One of my fingerprints on anything I've worked at is usually there's like a Z archive for things or like Z retired, and that's because when I'm sorting folders or tag categories or whatever, that automatically puts that important stuff, or rather that unimportant stuff, at the bottom. It's in the Z archive folder so that it gets tucked away. We don't look for it unless we actually want to. And with numbers too. Like if you're gonna do 1 through 10 or something, make sure that you do 0, 1, 0, 2. That way when you hit 10, because otherwise it'll sort wrong. It'll go 1, 10, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But if you do 0, 1, 0, 2, it'll sort correctly. Which it's a real subtle thing, but man, I can't tell you how many times that saved my butt because I just like, oh, I can sort this alphabetically, and then bang, that's everything that I need.
Yeah, exactly. I think that pretty much touched on the overview of the naming convention, and there's going to be additional episodes that goes a little bit more depth about it. But thank you so much for watching, and if you have any questions, please feel free to let us know in the comments, and make sure you watch the next episode where we will be talking about custom fields. Super exciting stuff.
I love it.
And which be sure to subscribe now, and if you haven't already, so you don't miss out. And if you want to learn more about the customer journey, get Paul's free How to Automate Like a Pro mini course, which is at the bottom of this. And if you want to get some pre-built customer journey automations, I'm going to have a couple links at the bottom here too, full snapshots that you can download. And if you have any more questions, please feel free to leave them below.
See you next time, everybody. Thanks for hanging out.